Good evening. All right, I'll take it. I was thinking earlier today, it was just 2 years ago that I was boring you in the exact same way, talking to you in a much more smaller space over at 1155. And it's nice to see how far we've come in such a short time. We're super excited to have everybody here today to kick off our first grad week ever. We have a whole series of events. This is just really the first one. Tomorrow night, we'll have Last Night Out. We rented out Second City privately just for all of us to have one last time as a cohort and a class all together. And then on Friday, we're going to have an open house for you to bring any of your family in, show them around. We'll have coffee, food, stuff like that. So we're so excited to have you here tonight. I did learn today, too, interesting fact, I thought this was the first lecture that we've done. In fact, that is not the case. It has been done before, so we're super excited to add to that tradition and continue it and get it back started here today. There are a lot of faculty members and staff and other students around Harris that wanted a chance to be here today but just couldn't. So we have to start off the program tonight, we have a quick video for some of the folks to say goodbye that didn't have a chance to be here tonight.
I think it's just very, very pleasing to go and take a walk around the campus if you have nothing to do and you automatically start feeling nice because it's beautiful.
Well, I just wanted to say congratulations, you've made it. Now the hard part just begins. You have to go out into the real world and do something with the knowledge that you've accumulated. But don't forget, always have those betas.
Harris graduates, you worked very hard to reach this day of celebration. I am very proud of you and look forward to your future accomplishments. Please come back and visit. Congratulations, class of 2019.
Congratulations, class of 2019.
We're so proud of you, and we can't wait to see what you do next.
We'll miss seeing you at the Keller Center.
And 1871.
But I'll still be in your inbox.
Congratulations. Wherever you go, go with all of your heart. That's what brought you here in the first place.
I'm gonna miss it a lot. I think just seeing everyone every day, I have met such great people here, and it's always fun to just come in and say hi to everyone and just hang out and chat, so I think I will really miss that.
Congratulations, class of 2019. It has been a real pleasure getting to know you. I am going to miss you dearly. Please come back and see us. Mwah.
Congratulations to the class of 2019. You were the first class that I recruited in admissions at Harris, and I've been so proud of all the things that you brought to the community and what you're going to do moving forward. You've been an honor to work with, and I look forward to staying close to you as I'm along.
Good afternoon, class of 2019. Congratulations on reaching this milestone event. I'm privileged to have an opportunity to share a few words before you graduate in a couple of weeks. So I'll keep it brief and wish you best of luck. Just a few quick reminders before you head out the door. First thing, be a critical thinker, not a cynical one. So important. You can be realistic about what policy can do and what it can't do, but don't be negative about it.
Congratulations, Harris School graduates 2019. We are all so proud of you for all the hard work you've put in and so thrilled and excited for you for everything that lies ahead. Your super bright futures. Go on, make us proud, stay in touch, and most of all, make a difference in the world.
Dear class of 2019, happy graduation. No matter where you go as your next destination, I hope Harris will always be part of your journey. 毕业快乐.
Second suggestion, don't forget about the economist's favorite trade-off, efficiency versus equity. Fair policies may be distortionary, but efficient policies may be too unfair. So keep both in mind as you move forward. Use your heart and your head as you go forward in your career.
Hi, I would like to wish all the graduates good luck in their new endeavors. Please stay in touch. I'm truly miss seeing you guys in the hallways, and please stop by to say hello when you're in Chicago. God bless.
Well, I want to say congratulations. You have completed your studies here at the university, and we're very proud of you. This is not an easy place to do your graduate work. You should be congratulated both on your effort and on your accomplishments.
Congratulations, future policy leaders. Always remember that leadership is persuasion, and persuasion is a process. Good luck.
And don't forget about the soft things. They really matter. Ethics, work effort, integrity, accountability. Be your best self, no matter what. Act as if everything you say or do will be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal above the fold. Or perhaps with a Twitter version of that, every email you write is going to end up in its 140-character concise form being tweeted out. That's a little scary, so act honorably and you won't get into trouble.
Keller is amazing, but I oftentimes find myself socializing for more hours than I need to.
Congratulations, everyone! I'm very proud of your hard work, and I wish you a happy and productive rest of your lives.
Congratulations, class of 2019. Remember to keep evaluating and analyzing yourself and your decisions, and don't be scared to reboot when necessary.
And then my last suggestion is to not work so hard. Enjoy yourselves, engage with your family, your community, go to the B'nai Mitzvah, the weddings, the christenings, and even the funerals that lie ahead in your future. You'll be the richer for it, and so will your communities. So again, thanks for all your hard work and engagement while you've been here at Harris, and I look forward to celebrating with you and your families in a couple of weeks.
Congratulations to the Harris Public Policy graduating class of 2019. We are all so proud of you. In your time here, we have watched you absolutely transform. You've built new skill sets, found new passions, and found new ways of looking at the world's biggest problems. We've also watched you transform as a class. From coming in as strangers just a few short years ago, we have watched you build lifelong friendships and connections. It has been such a joy to watch and help you find each other and build community here at Harris. We hope these relationships that you've formed will continue to serve you for the rest of your career. You have done so much for this school. We appreciate your intellect, your enthusiasm, your ideas. You have definitely left this place better than you found it. We will miss you so much, but we can't wait to see what you'll do out in the world, and there is no doubt that the world will be better for having you in it. Congratulations.
Hello everyone from the class of 2019. I just want to congratulate you on your journey here. Thank you for your time that you spent studying and learning with us over the last couple of years. And it's our privilege to have you among our alumni corps, and we look forward to all the great things you'll be doing in the policy world.
To my graduating TAs, thank you for your patience, wit, and dedication to the Harris community. And to my students, it's been an honor to share a learning space with you. I'm hoping you're going to change the world, but I'm counting on you to keep everybody honest. Good luck. Bye.
Congratulations, class of 2019. I'm looking forward to seeing where you all land and what good you do.
Class of 2019, you guys know that you are going to always have a special place in my heart. We started at the same time together, we learned about University of Chicago together, and you were so patient when I had none of the answers to any of your questions. I'm so sad to see you guys go, and I will miss seeing your lovely faces in the Keller Center, but I'm so excited to see all the ways that you're going to make the world a better place. So congratulations, and don't be a stranger.
Congratulations, it's really exciting that you guys are graduating. I can't wait to see what you're up to next.
Graduates, many congratulations on your accomplishment. What you've experienced here at the University of Chicago is something truly special and unique. And on behalf of all of ASA staff and our team, we really do hope that your experience here was nothing short than wonderful. I do want to encourage you to take your experiences and all the skills that you've gained here and translate those into something that is positive and useful for as many people as you possibly can. So now go and be that person, and good luck.
Hi everyone, you are graduating in a couple of days. Can you believe that? I am so proud, so honored, so happy to have accompanied you on this journey at Harris, and I hope you come back to see us soon. Thank you for trusting us with your journey here, and congratulations. Congratulations. Felicidades. Love you. Mwah.
Hey class of 2019, congratulations. This, as you know, is my first year teaching full-time at Harris, and you truly have made it absolutely a pleasure. I wish all the very best to all of you. I hope we stay in touch and our paths cross in the future. Even Giselle. Thanks so much, guys. Take care.
Congratulations, class of 2019. You've been a lot of fun. I'm so excited for you to go put your hard work into practice, and I wish you much success in the years ahead. And oh yeah, don't forget to stay in touch.
Well, I'm bummed out that I only got to spend a few months in the new building. No, I mean, I think I'll just sort of miss seeing my colleagues in the PhD program on a more consistent basis, but those friendships don't go away.
Congratulations, Harris grads. I know this is a little bit of a tough time to be going into the evidence-based policy business, so I hope you all remember the lesson of AP1, which is everything is politics, so it doesn't matter anyway. Congratulations, go and do great things, we're counting on you.
Hello, class of 2019, congratulations on a great time here at Harris. I know you all go out to do many great things in the world. Make it so.
Congratulations, Harris students. Please go change the world. Do not forget to use the monopoly model. The competition is the most important thing in what matters.
From the Career Readiness team here at Harris, class of 2019, congratulations.
Whether it's 5 months or 5 years, we're going to be here for you in Espanol or English.
Resist complacency in all that you do and continue to create change.
From the Evening Master's Program, congratulations, graduates of the class of 2019. We couldn't be more grateful that you really welcome and embraced this new program. Always remember, #OneHarris.
Hey policy people, congratulations. We're gonna miss you, but you're always a part of this family. So don't ever forget that when you need to negotiate, you can call us. Life is ironic and careers are ironic, so remember that and look for the irony and lean into it, because that's probably exactly where you're supposed to be. Congrats, class of 2019. We did it!
Best wishes to all of you, and it's been a real pleasure to be teaching you. And best of luck in your futures. Thank you.
It seems like just yesterday everybody got here for orientation. We're so sad to see you go. Congrats.
Congratulations to the class of 2019. We will miss you at the Keller Center. Come back, we will miss you.
And your reimbursement check's in the mail.
Not really.
Congratulations everyone on graduating. I hope you'll leave with some fond memories of your intro stats, and that your future holds many instances of being in the right tail of the distribution, and hopefully see you again sometime in the future.
Congratulations, class of 2019. You think this is the end of the journey, but it's just one step in the whole process. Have a good time.
Hello, graduates. Class of 2019, congratulations. It's a great accomplishment. What I've observed about graduate school is by the time you get really good at it, we kick you out and you graduate. And so we're kicking you out. You're graduating and you're going to do something else new, and you'll do it well, just like you did here. So don't be a stranger.
Congratulations. We're so proud of what you've accomplished and counting on you to do great things in the world.
What are you going to miss about Harris?
Honestly, running into all my friends in the forum distracted me from work.
Just spending time getting to know people. Like you said, there's such a diverse array of people here.
The friends.
Yes, definitely the people. I think we've met some amazing people here, both the students and the staff.
I'm
made a lot of friends here for 2 years, and if I go back to China, maybe I'll never see them again in my life, and I'll miss them.
The people. I mean, that one's pretty easy.
And then to give some final remarks and introduce tonight's keynote speaker, your Dean of Students, Kate Shannon-Biddle.
It's so great to be here with you guys tonight. Can we thank Nikki for making that amazing video? I see that fully a third of us are crying now, so mission accomplished, Nikki. Good job. It was so heartwarming, too, to see how you responded to faculty and staff as they came up on the screen. This place is a family, and as soon as you go, we're going to feel empty inside. So, so many people said it in the video, but please come back and visit. You have been such an amazing class. You've done so many amazing things here, and so we're excited for what's next for you, but we also want you to, stop by, bring, cookies or whatever. It's fine. I want to thank Brandon Kurzwig for the inspired idea to do Grad Week, our first ever Grad Week. We wanted to have just a few more opportunities for you before you leave to spend time together, have fun together, learn together, and for us all to get to say goodbye to you 3 or 4 days in a row. I'm so excited particularly about what we're going to do tonight, which is the last lecture. I know that the reason why many of you came here was to learn from particular faculty members, that they have shaped your thinking, given you new approaches, inspired you. And so, of course, tonight we are going to feature a lecturer or a faculty member who so many of you have learned from and been inspired by, and that is Jens Ludwig. Excellent choice, guys. Really good choice. So Jens is the Edwin A. and Betty L. Bergman Distinguished Service Professor at the University of Chicago's Harris School of Public Policy. He serves on the editorial board of the American Economics Review. He's an elected member of the National Academy of Medicine of the National Academies of Science. 10 years ago, Jens founded the University of Chicago's Crime Lab to help use the power of data and social science to improve social conditions in Chicago and in cities around the world. The Crime Lab has been the subject of news stories in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and many other news outlets. It is also the recipient of the $1 million MacArthur Foundation Award for Creative and Effective Institutions, which is the organizational equivalent of the MacArthur Genius Prize for individuals. And most importantly, the Crime Lab has helped to inform a number of key policy decisions that have helped reduce violence and unnecessary prison and jail confinements. We, of course, all know Jens for his inspiring teaching. His crime policy course is among the most sought-after courses at Harris. So tonight, we wanted to hear from him one last time what wisdom he'll leave you as you leave us. And for those of you that couldn't get into his class, close enough, right? Jens.
Let me see if I'm smart enough now to. So thank you so much for. This is a huge honor. So it's a huge honor to be selected to do this. I've been talking. Can everybody hear me? Okay. I've been talking to my friends about this for the last couple of weeks since I found out, and I thought people were going to say things like, "Congratulations, that's amazing," or "I've got ideas about what you could talk about," but instead the modal reaction has been, "Oh my God, that's a huge amount of pressure," which is not what you want to hear in this situation. And so I've been spending a bunch of time talking to my family who's here today about what I might talk about. And I was thinking, for something like a last lecture at a university like the University of Chicago, it's got to be a really big idea. And so I said to my wife and my 15-year-old daughter, what do you think about a lecture built around the theme of you are not special. Thank you. And so my wife responded first, and she said, in a slightly surprised tone of voice, "That's not bad. It's actually kind of profound." I tried not to take offense at the fact that she sounded surprised. And then she paused for a second, and she was thinking, but it sounds vaguely familiar. Where do I know that from? You are not special. You are not special. What is that from? What is that? Oh, I know what that's from. She said, "That's from Fight Club." She said, "Really? This is the University of Chicago? More students and faculty have won Nobel Prizes from this university than any other university in the world, and you are going to leave them at their last lecture with the wisdom of Tyler Durden." So obviously this made me feel a little defensive. And so I said, no, you've got this all wrong. I actually had something much more philosophical in mind. Because if you think about the idea of you are not special, it actually is one of the core ideas at the heart of Buddhism. A lot of Buddhist philosophy, this is a central idea. I thought for a minute that this might work and get me off the hook. And then my 15-year-old, she got a funny look on her face, and she said, "Wait a second. I've got to call bullshit. The only thing that you know about Buddhism or philosophy is from watching Kung Fu Panda." So they both said, "Why don't you talk about something that you actually know something about?" And so I started to think about why I got interested in working on urban policy in the first place. And so I went to Rutgers University, located in New Brunswick, New Jersey. I started college in 1986, where if you've taken my crime class, you might remember 1985, 1986 was basically the start of the crack cocaine epidemic in the United States. And it hit cities, including small cities like New Brunswick, on the east and west coast first. And things very, very quickly got out of hand in so many cities around the country. The homicide rate basically doubled in the United States over the course of something like a 4 or 5 year period. One of the things that made a big impression on me when I was in college is I was a volunteer soccer coach. This is me in the hat, the one on the right. And I was a soccer coach in New Brunswick for the New Brunswick Parks and Rec Department, and we basically fielded as many kids as I could fit in my Ford Escort. I would encourage you not to do the math and think through how many kids were stuffed into my Ford Escort. Don't think about the safety implications of this. One of the things that really struck me about being a soccer coach at Rutgers was, I would go pick the kids up and then I'd drop them off after the game. And so you would see I got to see firsthand the neighborhood conditions in which these kids were growing up in the middle of the crack cocaine epidemic. And the other thing that I saw is I have maybe the world's worst sense of direction. And so I would just figure out where somebody lived when, the next week they'd be moved again. And I really got a sense for the massive amount of residential instability in these kids' lives. So that made a big impression on me personally, but I thought, I've got to actually have a real job. So I went to graduate school at Duke in economics, which I thought was a real profession. And at least before I became an economist. Duke at the time was a very good basketball school. It was not the world's greatest economics department. And I remember sitting in the middle of a class on how to do time series econometrics to forecast stock prices and thinking, oh my God, this is like the most boring thing in the entire world. And, this was like 1990, 1991. And just a few years before, a sociologist at the University of Chicago named William Julius Wilson had written a book called The Truly Disadvantaged. And so I would, behavioral science teaches you the way to do anything that you find aversive is to come up with little tricks for yourself. And so I would say, all right, if I do 5 minutes of studying of this boring time series econometrics, I'll allow myself 10 minutes of reading William Julius Wilson, Truly Disadvantaged. And at some point I was like, you know what, this is ridiculous. Why don't I actually do the thing that I'm really interested in? And so I did. My first job was at Georgetown in their public policy school, which is great in many ways, but I woke up one day and I thought, if I'm working on the challenges facing American cities, I don't know how many people have been to Washington, but Northwest DC, we lived right next to campus. It's the fanciest part of DC. It's only become fancier since we left. I thought if I'm working on urban problems, we really shouldn't be living somewhere like Northwest DC. We should be living on the south side of Chicago. And so we moved to the University of Chicago 10 years ago. That was the summer of 2007, and later that fall, I don't know how many of you here remember, but there was a doctoral student from Senegal in the chemistry department named Amadou Sis, who defended his doctoral dissertation, and then a week later he was coming home from an ice cream social at 1 a.m. This was about a block from the old Harris, I guess also a block from the new Harris building, and someone robbed him for his backpack. I don't know if he tried to resist or it just got caught on his shoulder, but whatever happened, the person who was trying to rob him wound up shooting him point blank with a stolen .22. If you ever walk by the I House on 59th Street, you'll see that there's a bench out there in his honor. This led to a lot of soul searching at the university, like how can it be that we've won 90 Nobel Prizes and yet our research has not had impact literally in our backyard? The university should be doing something more helpful to the city of Chicago and other cities. And so the idea that we had was to start the crime lab, to try and do research that wouldn't just sit in journals on a shelf, but would actually at least aspire to be helpful out in the real world. So one of the types of problems that we've been working on lots of different problems, how to reduce gun violence, how to reduce over-incarceration, how to reduce high school dropout. But the problem that I want to talk about in the rest of my time is the challenge that the city of Chicago, and not just the city of Chicago, have had with policing, which has really come to the fore in public policy conversations all around the country right now. If you've been here for the last 2 years or 3 years, depending on your program in graduate school at the University of Chicago, you will know exactly who this is. This is Chicago police officer Jason Van Dyke, who was recently convicted of shooting a teenager named Laquan McDonald on the south side of Chicago, on Pulaski Avenue, actually, just a few miles west of where we are here. You've probably gone over Pulaski a million times going to Midway Airport. This is the most salient recent example. This is a problem the city of Chicago has been struggling with for a long time. If you look at the history of the Chicago Police Department, you will see examples like there was an elite unit that wound up getting disbanded because a bunch of police officers basically formed their own little criminal gang to rip off drug dealers. This goes back at least our knowledge of this goes back at least to 1960, when there was a big scandal on the north side of the city in the Edgewater neighborhood. This was wound up being called the Somerdale scandal for the Somerdale Police District, where a bunch of police officers caught a burglar in the act and then wound up, the officers who caught him said, we like nice things too. And they forced him to start committing burglaries on their behalf. They would act as lookouts. The burglar eventually got caught by the Evanston police and turned state's evidence. He started to cooperate with the Cook County state's attorney. And in response, the officers that had forced him to do this tried to assassinate him twice. Now, this is something that I not only have a lot of professional interest in, but I have personal interest as well in this question of how do you make sense of people engaging in this type of behavior, because my family comes from Germany. I was born in Germany. We're the first generation to come to the United States. My father was he actually grew up in a suburb of Munich, a suburb of Munich that many of you have probably heard about, which is Dachau. And one of the interesting things, or one of the really interesting things from a history of science perspective, is the huge impact that World War II wound up having on the field of social psychology. The question, literally the question in the second half of the 20th century for social psychology is, how could this have happened? How can it be that human beings can behave in this way? And so this launched a huge program of research, including one of the most famous social psychology studies of the 20th century, which was carried out by a Yale psychologist named Stanley Milgram. And some of you may have heard of this experiment. And so what Stanley Milgram set out to do is to try and understand obedience, human obedience, the psychology of obedience. And his plan was he designed an obedience experiment, and step one was going to be to carry this out in the US context. And then step two was going to be to go over to Germany and enroll a bunch of German subjects so that he could understand the different ways in which Germans were so much more obedient than Americans and why that is. So let me just talk you through a little bit of how the Stanley Milgram obedience experiment worked. So he got 40 guys from Connecticut, and he's at Yale. He got 40 guys to come into to the lab from a mix of occupations, mostly middle-aged guys. You can see it's a mix of ages. And then he also had a Confederate who participated in all these experiments as well. And so the naive study subject, so they tell the naive study subject that this is going to be a study of the effect of punishment on learning. So they bring the naive study subject and the Confederate together, and they say, okay, we're going to decide who gets to be the teacher and who gets to be the learner. And so the third person in this experiment is the experimenter, who is also a Confederate of Stanley Milgram's, in a white lab coat. You can see him right here. And so they say, all right, we're going to draw slips of paper out of a hat to decide who's going to be the teacher and who's going to be the learner. So it's rigged so that the naive subject always is the teacher, okay? And so both sheets of paper say teacher. The naive subject pulls out a sheet of paper. It says teacher. So then they take the Confederate into the other room. He's the learner. And they sit him in a chair, and they put leather straps over his wrists, so he's basically chained to the chair and he can't get out. And then they put an electrical probe, so the naive subject can see all of this happening, right? So he's looking through can see this part of the experiment. They put an electrical probe on the wrist, and then they say to the naive subject and the learner at the time, we're also going to put some paste in between the electrode and your wrist to prevent blisters and burns. Okay. Now they bring the naive study subject into the other room where he is with the experimenter in the white lab coat, where he's facing an electric shock generator, or what he believes to be an electric shock generator. And you can see how this is labeled from slight shock at 15 volts up to danger severe shock, and then something that goes beyond danger severe shock that's just labeled XXX at 450 volts. So he thinks that this is now connected to the learner in the other room, who's actually the Confederate. And then to make the subject, the teacher, believe that it really is an electric shock generator, they administer a sample 45-volt shock to the study subject. Okay. Now, what Stanley Milgram did is he taped the responses of the learner so that there would be consistency across all of the experimental implementations. And so at 75 volts, the learner, the Confederate in the other room, grunts and moans. At about 150 volts, the learner, the Confederate, says, let me out of here. At 180 volts, he says, I can't take the pain. And at 300 volts, he says, I absolutely refuse to answer anymore. Get me out of here. My heart is starting to bother me. And after 300 volts, basically, the Confederate, the learner, stops responding altogether. Okay, and the experimenter in the white lab coat just stays there very calmly and says, you have no choice, you must go on. So I thought it would be helpful to actually hear a little bit of this.
This will be 195 volts. Oh. The correct one. Let me out of here. Slow. Dance. Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let me out of here. You have no right to keep me here. Let me out. Let me out of here. Let me out. Continue, please. Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Go on. Let me out. Red. That is incorrect. This will be at 3:30. The correct phrase is rich boy. Let me out of here. My heart's bothering me. Let me out, I tell you. Let me out of here. Let me out of here. You have no right to hold me here.
The next phrase is fast.
Let me out. Let me out. Let me out of here. Let me out.
Bird, car, train, plane.
So you get a sense of this, right? The learner really is hysterical in parts of this, and the experimenter just says in a very, very flat voice, you have no choice, you must go on. So Stanley Milgram, as part of the study, one of the things that he did is he asked 40 of the leading psychiatrists of the time to make their predictions about how people would respond in this study, okay? And the psychiatrists, their prediction was that not more than half the people in the study would wind up administering more than 150 volts before they just stopped and refused to continue. You know, the psychiatrists thought, like, they understand the population distribution of psychopathology, and so the psychiatrists thought, you know, if you get 40 people in a study like this, you're bound to get at least one sociopath. So it's possible that you might get one person who would go beyond 300 volts, which is the voltage level where the learner just stops responding altogether. And they said, there's not even the sociopaths will all go all the way up to 450 volts. Okay. Now, what was the actual response pattern? Okay. How many people gave up at the slight shock level from 0 to 60 volts? Nobody. How many people gave up in the moderate shock level? Nobody. How many people actually gave up before 150 degrees? Nobody, or 150 volts. So we're now at 300 volts, okay? We're now at 300 volts, where the psychiatrists thought that only one sociopath in a pool of 40 would be willing to go, and only 5 out of 40 study subjects have given up. And it turned out that fully 2/3 of the study subjects went all the way to 450 volts. So remember, think about what's happening here. The learner is not responding at all, and the experimenter says, you must go on. So they're shocking someone who's just non-responsive at all, might be passed out in the other room. At this point, Stanley Milgram says, the study's over, there's no need to go to Germany. I think that we have learned something very, very deep and profound about the capacity for obedience from everybody. So many of you probably have heard of this Milgram experiment. As I said, it was one of the most famous social psychology experiments of the 20th century. Like, very interestingly, the second most famous social psychology experiment of the 20th century was by a guy named Phil Zimbardo, who turned out to be in Stanley Milgram's high school graduating class at James Monroe High School in the Bronx. Zimbardo got his PhD from Yale, winds up being a Stanford psychology professor, is also very interested in these post-World War II questions, and decides to carry out a study where he puts an ad in the Palo Alto newspaper looking for male college students for a study of prison life. He's going to pay them $50 per day. What they did, they got 70 applications. They have everybody come in and they take the California personality inventory, and they find the 24 guys who are most normal on every dimension on the California personality inventory. And then he randomly assigns some to be prisoners and some to be guards. And then they basically completely reconfigure the basement of the Stanford psychology building into a mock prison, where they replace the doors and turn the basement offices where there's no light into cells. You can see that there are bars over the windows. And so the first thing that they did is they had the guards set the rules for the prison. So there's a little bit of debate around the Stanford prison experiment about exactly how much coaching there was of the guards or how much of this was self-initiated. But I think what's really striking is how easy it was to get the guards to go along with all of this. And so, one of the first things that the guards did is they came up with the rules for the Stanford prison. And one of the rules is that the prisoners were to only refer to themselves and other prisoners by their number, 8612. And one of the other rules is that they could only refer to the guards as Mr. Correctional Officer. Bless you. Bless you what? Bless you, Mr. Correctional Officer. So the college students who are randomly assigned to be inmates, they get put into these cells in the basement of the Stanford psychology department. They have no idea what's going on. Their first night in the prison, the night shift comes in at 2:30 in the morning. They get everybody out of their cells in order to do a count, ostensibly to help them learn their prison numbers, okay? So everybody's starting to feel a little bit disoriented, but the first day basically goes reasonably smoothly at the Stanford prison. And then they got to the day two, where the inmates basically rioted. They tore off their numbers and they basically refused to come out of their cell for the count. So now you might be wondering, how did the college students who were the guards respond to this? You might have thought, well, maybe they would have negotiated with the inmates about how to, change the rules of the prison so this worked for everyone. Not so much. The guards basically responded with maximum force. They asked happened in the morning. They asked the night shift to stay on overtime, so they had twice the staffing. And they basically broke into all of the cells, ripped out the prisoners, stripped them naked, and took their clothes. They took their beds. They took the leader of the rebellion and put him into isolation. There had been a rule that nobody could be in solitary confinement for more than an hour. They just put the guy in there and left him there for days. The other thing that was going on in the basement was the Stanford IRB required Zimbardo, for safety reasons, to have fire extinguishers down there in case there's a fire. The guards said, we've got a good idea. Why don't we take the fire extinguishers and spray the inmates in their cells? So there are different types of fire extinguishers. These were carbon dioxide fire extinguishers that basically spray dry ice. If you don't know what dry ice does, one of the things that it does is it can give you frostbite. The other thing, the way that these carbon dioxide fire extinguishers work is they put out fires basically by sucking a lot of the oxygen out of the air where they hit, which if you do this outside is not such a huge idea, is not such a huge problem. But it's not ideal when you're using one of these fire extinguishers in a confined space without lots of air, like a basement office, a windowless basement office. Now, the other things that the guards did is they started to use things like push-ups as punishment for the inmates, including sometimes the guards would put their foot on the backs of the inmates to apply downward pressure. Zimbardo thought the guards originally made it where what Zimbardo later learned is this was a common punishment that was used at some of the German concentration camps. The guards also were ingenious in their ways of coming up with other ways to harass and punish the inmates, like cleaning the toilets with their bare hands. Yet eventually the guards realized, there's only 8 of us on a shift at a time and 12 of them, or actually, 3 or 4 of us on a shift and 12 of them at a time. There's no way that we're going to be able to run this prison by force the entire time. So they came up with a psychological strategy where they took the 3 inmates who were least involved in the rebellion and they created a privilege cell where they brought them into the privilege cell and they gave them their beds back, they gave them their clothes back, they gave them really good food, and they let them eat the food in front of the rest of the prisoners. And then in a genius psychological twist, remember, these are just college students who were randomly assigned to be prisoners. In a genius twist, what they did is the very next day, they swapped. They took the 3 inmates out of the privilege cell and put them back in the general population and took 3 other prisoners and put them in the privilege cell. The leaders of the rebellion at this point think, these guys must be snitches working for the guards. And at this point, any sense of cohesion and trust among the inmates has been completely destroyed. And when you look at research now on actual prisons, this is a common tactic that people who run prisons really use. Supposed to be a 2-week prison experiment. You can imagine some of the prisoners start to break down. They can't take it anymore. Prisoner 819 starts to have a nervous breakdown, begs Zimbardo to get him out of there. Zimbardo's in his office off the yard in the prison talking to him. And one of the guards brings the other inmates outside of Zimbardo's office and has the guards chant, "Prisoner 819 is a bad prisoner. Prisoner 819 is a bad prisoner. Prisoner 819 is a bad prisoner. We're being punished because of prisoner 819." When 819 breaks down yet again and says to Zimbardo, "I don't want to leave. I've got to go back there and prove to them that I'm not a bad prisoner." Okay. Now, day 5, Zimbardo's girlfriend, Christina Maslach, who just finished her PhD at Stanford in psychology at the time, she comes to visit to take Zimbardo out to dinner. At 10 p.m., the guards are taking the inmates to the toilet run. So they're not allowed to go to the bathroom at night. The bathroom is outside of the prison. And so the guards had come up with a rule that on the toilet run, on the bathroom run, everybody had to wear a hood to go. Christina Maslach sees that. She also sees that there's another prisoner who's had a nervous breakdown in a different way, and their entire body is covered in a psychosomatic rash. She goes to Zimbardo and says, "This is madness, you've just got to stop." So 5 days in of a 12-day experiment, Zimbardo calls it quit to the Stanford prison experiment. The Milgram experiment and the Zimbardo Stanford prison experiment together had a hugely profound impact on everybody's thinking about human behavior and bad behavior in particular. It no longer seemed reasonable to think that bad behavior is just done by bad people. It started to become very, very clear that situations played a hugely important role in this as well. Now, what is it about the situation that contributes to this a bunch of random college students behaving so badly? So Zimbardo's hypothesis is that part of what's going on is power differentials. And I can tell you, this really resonates with me as well. So, over the last 10 years that we've been doing the crime lab, I have visited, almost every public high school in the city of Chicago you can name. I've been to the juvenile detention center on the west side of the city. I've been to the Cook County Jail on the south side. I've been out with the police in neighborhoods like Englewood and Garfield Park and Austin at 3 in the morning. Like, I've seen a lot over the last 10 years. I would say the worst behavior, I think really reinforcing Zimbardo's hypothesis, the worst behavior I've seen in the 10 years here in Chicago is by foundation program officers. Those are the people who actually have the biggest power differential. They're the ones who are giving out money, and the people they're interacting with are desperate to get it. I have seen behavior that just makes you wince. The other source of truly terrible behavior that I've seen in my life is by some of my faculty colleagues here at the University of Chicago. The way that they treat students, the way that they treat staff, the way that they treat junior faculty. Actually, I was just randomly picking a University of Chicago building to show here. It's weird that this was the economics department. That's weird, right? So this brings us full circle now to the question of policing. So how do we make sense of a lot of these terrible events that we see with police departments in Chicago and other cities around the country? And a lot of the conversation and our intuition around this goes to thinking about who are these people who are police and what's wrong with them, right? And why don't they have more empathy and compassion to the people that they're serving? Given the huge racial disproportionality and so many bad outcomes in the criminal justice system, racism is a natural dispositional hypothesis as well. And you can see why if you look at the general social survey and attitudes towards all whites in the United States. You can see self-reported levels of racism have been declining over time, but are still shockingly high. This is just what people are willing to say to survey interviewers. And this doesn't even include racism that people might not know themselves, like implicit bias, right? And so then I think the empirical question becomes, how much of what we see on the policing side is due to the person versus the situation? We know they're both going to matter, but what is the relative importance versus of one explanation versus the other in the policing context? So here's some data from a study by Harvard economics professor Roland Fryer about police use of force. And so this is the odds ratio for use of force by white officers for African-American citizens compared to white citizens. And so you can see that a white police officer is about 2.5 times more likely to use force against a civilian if that civilian is black than white, right? You can see that we have a huge problem with policing in the United States. The question is, what sort of problem is this exactly? Now, one of the policy prescriptions that lots of people naturally think about when you see data like this is, boy, we really need to think very hard about changing the composition of police departments, including increasing the representation of minority officers as well, who come from these communities where policing is most heavily concentrated and so on, right? And so you can ask yourself how much of the problem of policing in the United States would be solved if we swapped out who's the police. And so here's the odds ratio of use of force against black versus white civilians among black officers. It's nearly as high as what you see for white officers. Or put differently, if we replaced even every single white police officer at the Chicago Police Department, we would have almost nearly as many uses of force, and we would do almost nothing in reducing the racial disparities in police use of force against African Americans, right? Now you're a bunch of Harris students, you might look at this and say, well, use of force is a very broad definition, or broad outcome. It's really police shootings that's the thing that I think is most salient in the policy agenda. So here's some data from Roland's study about police shootings. And so one of the, there's no perfect way after the fact to know whether a police shooting is in policy or out of policy police shooting. But one of the markers that people look at is whether the person who was shot, whether there's a weapon discovered at the scene. Okay, so we can look at whether there's a weapon discovered at a police shooting based on the race of the civilians who were shot and the race of the officers who were involved. And so here you can see the blue bar here is the likelihood that you find a weapon at the scene for white officers. And here are the two bars for whether the civilian who shot is white or black. That rate is about the same. For white and black civilians. The other comparison that you could do here is say, if the person who shot is black, how much does it matter whether the officer involved in the shooting is white or black? And you can see the similarities there as well. There was a different study looking at police use of force that came out several decades ago that reached a very similar conclusion that argued basically none of the characteristics of the police officer, their age, their level of experience, their gender, their race, ethnicity, their attitudes towards the job, their level of cynicism, almost none of that explains very much in the variation that we see across police officers in use of force. Now, it's a very surprising finding, right? Here's another way that you could imagine thinking about this is like you could say, well, let's go to a totally different context from the US, from Chicago and other American cities. Let's go to one of the most homogenous societies we can think about. Let's go to a country like Japan, where 98.5% of the population is ethnic Japanese. And we can say, what does policing look like there? So there have been comparative studies that ask representative samples of the public, what do you think about the police in Japan and in the United States? So you can see it's a 0 to 3 scale. 2 is quite a lot. You can see in Japan, the average rating of the police is 1.84, nearly quite a lot. Then you can ask, how does policing in the United States compare to, or the public's attitudes towards policing in the US compare to what you see in Japan? And if anything, it's actually a little bit higher than in Japan, right? Despite all of the problems that we have with policing. So I think what this starts to get you to think is maybe a big problem, I mean, there are many, many problems with policing, but maybe one of the problems is something that's just endemic to the power differentials or something else of policing and the situation that police are put into. Okay, so wait, there's more. There's one more social psychology experiment I wanna talk about, and then we'll talk about why this is relevant for all of you as public policy people. So there's one more, I think, really important psychological insight, which is not just that people make mistakes. So I want to tell you about one more social psychology study from the 1960s. This is, for those of you who are 30 years younger than me, you might not even know who this is. This is Fidel Castro, who ran Cuba for many, many years. So, he was a very prominent person in the 1960s and a very controversial person if you think about the height of the Cold War in the 1960s. So the social psychologists at Duke got 50 students to enroll in this experiment. And every student, every study subject was given an essay about Castro. Okay, and what they did is they randomly varied two things about these essays. One thing that they randomly varied was whether they told the study subject that the author of the essay chose the topic. So every essay was pro or anti-Castro. It was either pro or anti-Castro. So condition one is the study subjects were told the author of the essay picked this topic. This was their college application essay. The other treatment condition here was people were told the essay author was assigned this topic. This was a question on a political science final exam, criticize Castro or defend Castro. So the other thing that was randomly assigned then is whether the essay itself was pro or anti-Castro. And then the study subjects were asked, tell us how pro or anti-Castro you think the author of this essay is, okay? The y-axis here is, the higher the value, the more pro-Castro the study subjects thought the essay author was. The lower the value, the more anti-Castro. So the first set of bars here are, the blue bar here is whether the essay was pro-Castro, orange bar is whether the essay was anti-Castro. And these are the study subjects who were told that the essay author picked the topic. Right? So it makes total sense that the study subjects would say, oh yeah, if it's a pro-Castro essay, and you told me that the author chose the topic, of course I'm going to think that that essay author is way more pro-Castro than someone who chose to write an anti-essay. Like, that makes total sense, right? Now let's look at the set of people, the study subjects who were told the person who wrote this essay had no choice in the topic. They had no choice in whether they were supposed to write a pro or anti-Castro essay. And you see big statistically significant differences in the degree to which the study subjects believe that the author was pro-Castro or anti-Castro. Okay, now this is a hugely important, so the Stanley Milgram and the Stanford prison experiments, what they do is they make you realize that people make cognitive errors. What this study makes you realize is it's not just that people make cognitive errors, they don't realize that they're making cognitive errors. In psychology, this is called the fundamental attribution error, that we all have a natural tendency when we see other people's behavior to overestimate the importance of the disposition of the person and substantially underestimate the importance of the situation they're in. And I think what's also really useful to realize here is how self-reinforcing this psychological error is. You see someone behaving badly in situation A, you have a tendency, in principle, there's an identification problem there. Is that behavior due to the person? Is that behavior due to the situation? If you have a tendency to over-attribute their behavior to them, you think this person's a jerk, I don't want to ever interact with them again. You don't get to see them in situations where they would behave well, right? So the fundamental attribution error is self-reinforcing. It has that self-reinforcing feature. So what does this mean for you as policymakers? Well, I think it's hugely powerful in thinking through lots of different policy problems across a bunch of different policy domains to recognize that all of us have this default over-attribution of the person rather than the situation. This leads us to give too few people second chances, and it also leads us as policymakers to underinvest in changing the situation. So here's an example. Here's one example of underinvesting in changing the situation. When, after the Laquan McDonald shooting, the US Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division under the Obama administration came in and did an investigation of the Chicago Police Department. And one of the immediate things that they noticed is they said, we have a recommendation in the US that no sergeant, no supervisor should ever have more than 10 officers to supervise. But in Chicago, what we, the Department of Justice, are seeing in many busy districts is every sergeant is supervising at least 20 officers. Why is that important? Well, in the Stanford prison experiment, the worst behavior we saw by the guards was on the night shift when the guards thought no one was watching, right? How do all of us behave when we think that no one is watching? This is an example of massively underinvesting in changing the situation. Let me just give you one more example. So I've been, since the early 1990s, I was working on a HUD experiment called Moving to Opportunity that took families in some of the most distressed public housing projects in the United States. So this was in Chicago, this was the Robert Taylor Homes, which is basically at Garfield Boulevard and State Street, running several miles north of that. They took families from very distressed housing projects like the Robert Taylor Homes, and by random lottery, they gave some families housing vouchers to move to low-poverty neighborhoods like Hyde Park. Basically moving people, you could think about it as moving from west to east across Washington Park. Now, you've all been in Chicago long enough to know what that means. And what you can see is, especially people who move from west to east of Washington Park young in life, we can see dramatic impacts on their lifetime risk of criminal justice involvement, their lifetime earnings, and even premature mortality risk, right? And yet, we don't have serious policy conversations about doing anything like this, and I think partly because many people, they might not want to admit it, but they look at the social problems we see west of Washington Park and think that's due more to something about the people who live there rather than the situation that they're living in. Let me close by saying, I think this really has, very deep, profound insights for your professional lives when you leave the University of Chicago, but it also has lots of important implications for your personal lives too. So I want to close with one more example or one more story, a lesson that I learned actually from my wonderful 15-year-old daughter named Annika, who's here. She's a freshman at the University of Chicago's lab school. I asked her if I could tell this story, and she said absolutely not. And, as a parent, you have no choice but to respect the wishes of your kids. And so what I'm going to do to protect the identity of the innocents, I'm going to tell this story anonymously about a 15-year-old that I know named Shmonica. So Shmonica was participating in one of the academic clubs at her high school, one of the most intense academic clubs at her high school. And I'd heard these rumors of people staying up until like midnight, 1, 2, 3 in the morning at Lab High School. I thought, this is just ridiculous. Surely that can't happen. 2 weeks into Shmonica's freshman year, staying up till 1, 2, 3 in the morning, often near tears or in tears. Turns out that one of the juniors, the high school juniors who's helping lead this club, is basically tormenting the freshmen in this academic club, right? Terrible human behavior. And then a couple months later, after seeing Shmonica staying up till all hours, psychologically brutalized, crying all the time, and so on, Shmonica's father gets an email from one of the teachers at lab school that says, oh, there's some essay writing contest. Some student wrote a really good essay about some criminal justice, whatever, and now they're invited to submit to some big whatever, and we're wondering if you would be willing, the father would be willing to help, the anonymous father would be willing to help. And it turns out that the student who's asking for help here is the junior who was tormenting Shmonica. So what do you do as a parent? And so the first thing that I did is I went to Shmonica. The father went to Shmonica. The totally anonymous father went to Shmonica and said, Shmonica, what do you think me, anonymous father, should do? And Shmonica's initial reaction was, I think, the same reaction that all of us would have in that circumstance, which was over my dead body. And then a couple days later, Shmonica came back to her father and said, I thought about this a little bit more. And one of the things that I reflected on is this junior who's been tormenting me, her parents put an insane amount of pressure on her to do well academically at lab. It's just a pressure cooker at lab in general for people to go to fancy private universities. And some families just take this to the extreme, even within the insane distribution of lab If you guys put that sort of insane pressure on me, it's very possible that I would act like a crazy, mean person too. Why don't we take the high road here instead, and why don't you help her? And I think that there are maybe two important personal lessons to take away from this, which is, being more open to the role that the situation plays in shaping people's behavior. One thing is it makes us more understanding and better people. And it gets us to do our very small part in making the world a slightly less crummy place. And the other thing it does in our personal lives is it gets us to realize something about our own behavior. When we see people out in whatever situations they find themselves, we really like to think of ourselves as being special, and if you put us in that situation, we'd never behave that way ourselves. But I think the lesson of social psychology from the 20th century is that's really an illusion. That if you put us in any one of these situations, we'd be likely to behave exactly the same way, or put differently, I think in many ways, one of the key lessons from social psychology over the last 50 or 60 years is you really are not as special as you think you are. Thank you very much.
Jens, thank you very much for being our keynote address tonight. We highly appreciate it. I find myself in a common position of being between you, food, and booze, so I'm going to make this sweet. Just on behalf of the Student Affairs Office, we thank you for allowing us to be along with you on this journey that you had here at Harris. We look forward to celebrating with you over the next couple days, and thank you so much. Have a good night.